Good evening and welcome back to the Endeleo Show, better known as By Any Greens Necessary. I'm your host, Melvin Thompson, the Executive Director of the Endeleo Institute, the nonprofit arm of Trinity United Church of Christ, located at 400 West 95th Street in the beautiful Washington Heights community. It is gorgeous. It is another gorgeous day in the summer. I think we're like mid-summer now, and I mean, we're rolling. The weather is a lot more manageable. Our farmers market this past Saturday was, in a word, miserable. Miserable, is that good enough to you? Yeah, it's kind of miserable out there, and so people were kind of shriveling up a little bit. I think it was like 100-degree weather by 10 o'clock or something. Like, I don't know what it was, 1,000 degrees, but those are, kind of the, what Hotter Than July, Stevie Wonder's album Hotter Than July was all about, because there from time to time, the man upstairs orders that, and so we had, less people walking around in that heat, and understandably so. We're going to give you a pass on that, but, the weather going forward is going to be a lot more manageable. I even put in a better order with the guy upstairs, so we're going to be good. You don't think that's going to go nowhere? All right, well, I'll put it in and we'll see what happens. Give us a call today, 312-738-1060. Whatever's on your mind about community development. We are an organization. We're the nonprofit arm of our church, and so we focus in three areas: health, education, and community development. I'm going to show you the signage for our farmers market that's proudly displayed at the corner of 95th and Normal, better known as 467 West 95th Street. That really cool signature right there is on our billboard, and it talks about our 10th anniversary of hosting the farmers market at Trinity, and it's now a community farmers market. So there's to be no mistaking that this is for the community. It's not a Trinity thing. Everybody is welcome, and we really want you to come out and experience the vendors and all the folks that make this possible. A whole lot of work goes into it. We're open from 8 a.m. on every Saturday to 1 p.m. from now until, is it September 28th, T? September 28th, that last Saturday. And so please come out, get there early. We had, I believe, 4 farmers, and we usually have 6, I think, along with the other vendors. And again, understandably, that weather really can determine things sometimes, and we understand that. So that's why we do this 13 Saturdays, to give you an opportunity to shop with us. And that's kind of where I want to talk about a little bit today about, you hear this, buying black and shopping with our own in our own community, and having that dollar, circulate in our community several times before it leaves. And this is a topic that really bears repeating and revisiting, because I don't think that there's necessarily a silver bullet. So if you've got some ideas on, why it is that we don't do this instinctively, if there are barriers, or if you believe that we do it, and that we're just getting a bad rap, that we're not doing it. But it's clear that we struggle as African Americans when we are in the merchant space. And, I see some of those struggles even with our own farmers market, and I'm just being transparent about it, because, it takes quite a bit of effort to, as a farmer, and I certainly, haven't walked in those shoes, but I come from a my grandparents were farmers in Mississippi and owned thousands of acres of land, and I know it's a real arduous task. And when you're not getting the support, even at Pembroke Farms, where they are about 60 miles south of the city, when you've got limited support, at the farm, and then you're expected to, cultivate harvest all of this stuff, bring it to Chicago, not knowing if you're going to, sell out or make a profit or sell anything. And so I think there's a healthy respect. There needs to be a healthy respect for the plight of African American merchants. And, one of the interesting things we do at Endeleo, I mentioned health, education, and community development, and I was just sharing with my spectacular executive assistant that our young people from Christian Finger High School, where we institute a upward bound program, a college program for to teach college and to impart college and career readiness to first generation high school students who are, the first in their family to possibly go to college. Well, we sponsored this past week a bus tour to HBCUs, to historically black colleges and universities, and I believe this time we went south to Oklahoma. Was it Oklahoma, Tennessee, and what was the other one? I think it was Oklahoma and Tennessee, the main areas. And anyway, thank you, T. And anyway, and in that tour, it was just a 3-day tour, and we do that in the summer because we found that it's much easier. It's an easier lift to get young people involved in the middle of the summer rather than trying to navigate multiple spring breaks where people, some schools are out, some schools are in, and then there are other organizations that we're competing with trying to do the same thing. And so a couple of years ago, our director, came up with the idea, I believe, to say, hey, let's, when, nobody really does college tours in the summer, and you think, well, that's probably because most folks are out of school, but we've made some contacts and connections with some of the HBCUs, and they welcome the opportunity to have young people from Chicago and inner city to visit their school, and they make the accommodations. So the last 2 or 3 years we've really been successful getting a number of kids. I just found out today we 36 of them are returning today from that tour. And so we're going to Oklahoma, and they were going to the museum that features the historic Black Wall Street, the town, and the name escapes me, for where African Americans, merchants, set up a thoroughfare, a corridor where all African Americans were, operating businesses and thriving and, being self-contained and self-sufficient. I mean, you had doctors, you had pharmacists, you had grocers, you had diners, all run by African Americans. And, as has happened in the history of those efforts, they were destroyed. They were literally destroyed, the result of some misinformation and hearsay and something alleged that someone African American did to someone, some Caucasian person, and this created a firestorm. And what it did was it just triggered some feelings that were already, on the surface anyway, and all was needed was, just some fuel to do that. And it's a horrific story, and you should really do some research on, what really happened. This was almost like a bombing. To a degree where there were planes and fires and explosives and killings. I don't know the number of people that lost their lives, but it was like they never recovered. They virtually destroyed it. And I saw something on public television not too long ago where one of the grandsons, or maybe the great-grandsons, I think maybe even the grandson of one of the vendors, who was really a force in galvanizing people to even become part of this thoroughfare and be part of this corridor where, to encourage African Americans to do these businesses, and gave them the legal training to set up their own businesses. A monument has since been erected on this gentleman's behalf, and the PBS story was really getting the grandson to talk about his grandfather's legacy and what it meant, particularly in a really, really harsh time when racial tensions were really at a peak. And, if you fast forward to now in 2019, boy, I mean, there's so many similarities, maybe not as overt as they were back then, but still the evidence of redlining and the lack of access to capital and all the barriers and hoops, the low appraisals that we find in our community. And we know that because of our home ownership project that we've done the last 3 years in partnership with county government, with the land bank, and just seeing how in our communities properties, even after they've been restored, renovated, and just magnificently refurbished, they still don't garner the kind of values that they would in another community, in a Lincoln Park. Not even that extreme. Just in a community, maybe a middle class community of Caucasians, where the values are so distinct, and so we fight those battles. And so, is it any wonder that it's a struggle for an African American merchant that hangs out a shingle to do well when he struggles or she struggles to get capital, to do these, to focus on your business, keep the lights on, and keep people coming. So, and then satisfy customers enough where they'll come back because maybe they've had a not so great experience, and then they, promise never to return because of that one time, when we've been accustomed over the last, several decades to shop with people who don't, look like us, and no matter what kind of treatment we get, I mean, when we're followed in stores, all of those different components of, negativity in our shopping experience, we still find the fortitude to continue shopping with these people, despite, how we're treated. And so I think it's really time for an exploration of, how we approach shopping within our own community, shopping with others, and just shopping in general, because I think we've reached a point in our community where, in society, where the storefront is quickly giving way to e-commerce and the whole idea of shopping online and having everything delivered to you. And I've talked about this in the past couple of weeks about the convenience of doing that. Yet there are still avenues where folks still want to congregate. They want to gather in certain spaces, and maybe it's not so much about what the product is as it is just being with other people and having that social component to it. And so I think there's a real adjustment and a real opportunity to kind of sharpen what the retail experience looks like. And I'm saying that and really speaking to myself because we're the recipient of some funding, and we're in the process of creating a merchant space as a cafe. And I think I may have alluded to it before. And I was in a meeting with our design team, our architects, our HR people, and all the people that go into it. And I can tell you, it's an overwhelming experience to first renovate a property and change its use into something else. first and foremost, that's a challenge. There are dollars involved. Even with grant funding, there's still, some skin in the game, if you will, so to speak. So you have to, invest some of your own money. So you're still an investor with this particular grant funding, and so you really want to be prudent in every single dollar that goes into the establishment you're trying to create. And there's technical assistance to help you in that process. But if you've never done this before, you've never tried to open a business, and that's the case for us. This is not something that Endeleo as an organization does. And so we've reached out to people who have done this, who have extensive experience doing it, and yet it's still a heavy lift in terms of trying to create a successful business model that you can project that'll be significantly successful. And there's no way to obviously guarantee success, but there are things that you can do to try to ensure that your product is well received, that the atmosphere for it will be conducive to people wanting to be there. And I think with the internet and the e-commerce, that's what you must create. You must create these experiences. And so the farmers market is an experience. I can't say enough about what it's like to have people from the community, walking up, driving up, and doing business with other people who look like them, where services and goods are exchanged. We've got pastries, we've got jewelry, we've got taste testing, all from people who reflect the community. So it's an experience. It's open air. There's no storefront. It's a parking lot that's transformed into a marketplace. And I've heard from people who've traveled to Ghana and Africa and places like that, where those open air markets are the norm. That's how business gets done. And so even our pastor has shared about his trip to Ethiopia and how that was really an eye-opening experience, because the market is it's insane, with people just everywhere selling things, and it's just this mass of humanity. And so that experience we try to create or recreate at our farmers market. And now with this cafe, which will be located along the 95th Street corridor, part of our mission to revitalize that corridor and the Washington Heights community, is going to be the landscape that we're going to be attempting to do this. And as I said, the repurposing of the building is one thing, but the operations and the human resources and hiring people from the community who haven't had the opportunity to have these kind of retail experiences, to work in retail, to manage retail, to be responsible for, employees, to run a store, to do inventory, to interact with customers. This is all brand new. This is all brand new. And so when you factor in all of the plates and all the things that have to go right in concert with running a business, it's no wonder that so many of our small businesses, and both black and white, tend not to do well and go out of business. And so I guess the question is, so why why would we be attempting to do something like this? Well, because it's needed. And one of the things that we've understood in our Washington Heights community, which from a commercial standpoint has really a litany of depressed real estate, vacant buildings that could be used to conduct the retail experience. And so that's one factor of why we do it, because here's an opportunity that we stare at every single day that we're not taking advantage of. Possible we could, like history has shown, look within and create our own retail spaces, and have a really successful run at it, and not be, hesitant about what someone may try to do to destroy it. In 2016, that suggests $198 million literally leaks out of our community in Washington Heights to go elsewhere. And I'm not surprised by I'm surprised by the number, but I'm not surprised by the fact that that's happening, because I think you could put a blindfold and put that in any African American community, because that tends to be the norm, where we want what we want, and we are willing, to get in our cars or get on a bus or get on transportation, get on a bike, and travel to those places to get what we deserve, what our hard-earned money deserves. And there's no knocking that. I think what hasn't been done is a concerted effort to say, you know what, let's stop the madness and start redirecting that $198 million back onto the corridor, and say, here are opportunities for you to walk out of your home, to walk a block, and get what you need, starting with a cafe, and let's see how that can spread and connect to other things and other utilities that our community wants and needs, and then see if we can be that self-contained, self-sufficient community that is in our history. It's not something we haven't done before, but once it gets wiped away the way it has, then there's this tendency to not believe it exists. And I think that's the intention behind why it was done, to completely obliterate the history of us having the intellect and the grit to do the kind of things that we've done in our community amongst ourselves. And even when we came to Chicago during the Great Migration and other cities in the Midwest, I think of Broadway in Gary. I think of areas in Bronzeville that were thriving spaces where we were forced to live together, and as a result, we found ways to make it work for each other, working interactively, trading services for whatever we needed, and that seemed to work. And then, the powers that be decided that wasn't something that they wanted to see. And so I really want to keep this topic going forward, top of mind, as we close this show out, because it'll be instructive in terms of how we continue with the farmers market. I understand the plight of farmers and the idea that we do all of this work, we go, we travel, we lug all this stuff, and then we don't see the kinds of crowds that we need to see. It's an issue. It's an issue, and I think we need to come together as a community and say, there's no one coming in to save us. There's no magic bullet. We need to just make a concerted effort as individuals to support each other. So, with that, I hope to see you at the market next Saturday. Please shop with us, support Black farmers, support this organization, and we'll see you next week. Have a great day.